to my first meeting, anyway, of the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. Before we start the business of the day, I have a script to read out to you all, so I apologise. This is probably something you've heard many times before. But first, if I can remind everybody present, the meeting is being live streamed and it's being recorded for future viewing. Can all participants please mute themselves when they're not speaking to avoid any background noise or feedback? If members want to speak, please either raise your hand if your camera's on or physically use the raise hand function. If I don't see you, then my Cabinet Officer Mark will alert me to you. Can you only use the chat function on here if you have a technical issue? We're trying not, as we are recording, to have anything that people can't see, so that would be really helpful. And can I ask all other attendees, officers or other members, please to turn off their cameras and mute themselves until they're called to speak. If anyone has any difficulties hearing or being heard with the connection to the meeting, can you let me or the Democratic Officer know? Sometimes it helps if you turn your camera function off if there's an issue with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth. So that's the script bit. So if before we start we can have quick introductions, because I'm new and a lot of other members are new. So I'll kick this off. So my name's Jo Prothero. I am a 2022 intake, so I'm a brand new councillor. My ward is St Bride's Ward, which is the outposts, if you like, of the Vale of Glam County Borough Council, and I cover quite a wide geographical area from the outskirts of Lantwit at St Donat's all the way out to Awenny and Corntown. So it's quite a large, although rural area. As we're not sitting round a table, can we start alphabetically, if that would be okay, with quick introductions? So can we start with Councillor Carroll, if that's okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and welcome to your new role and congratulations on it. I'm Councillor George Carroll. I am the ward member for the Lamb Dock Board, which is probably the diametric opposite of yourself, Chair, in that you're the nearest ward to Bridgend and I'm the nearest ward to Cardiff, so opposite ends of the Vale. It's a lot smaller geographically in that you can probably walk from one end of the ward to another in 15 to 20 minutes. We have an electorate of around 1,600 and I'm also the leader of the Conservative group on the council as well.
Thank you, that's lovely. Councillor Drake?
Well, a minute. I'm Councillor Pamela Drake. I've represented the Castleham ward since 2008 and obviously I'm a returning member and pleased to be back on here.
Lovely. Councillor Franks?
Hi, good evening. Chris Franks. I represent Dilys Powys. And like Councillor George, I touch the boundary of Cardiff. Just to remind people.
Wonderful. Councillor Goodjohn.
Hi, I'm also a brand new councillor from 2022. I am in Caddick Ward, which is the east end of Barry, very diverse, lots of people and lots of different issues to deal with and problems to solve. And we have a wide range of diverse issues from a richer area in the north to a poorer area in the south. So lots of interesting things to do here.
Wonderful. Councillor Haynes.
Hello, my name's Steve Haynes. I'm also a new councillor of 2022. I'm a councillor for St Athan, which those of you who don't know it is probably the largest village in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Councillor Hamilton.
Right, I believe your mic's on, is it? Hello, my name's Howard Hamilton. I'm a councillor for Ilton in Barry. I was a councillor for that ward in 2012, 2017. Failed to get in, but managed to get in this time round. it's a very large ward, not only in terms of population, in terms of diversity, but nevertheless, it's we have the usual problems as other wards have. But I'm looking forward to serving the community over the next 5 years. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Councillor Hanks.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. I'm the ward member for Lantwick Major. I was first elected in 2017, so I'm a returning member and I haven't sat on this scrutiny committee before. Thank you.
Wonderful. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Belinda Lovelock-Edwards. I'm one of the councillors representing the Devon ward. Like many of my colleagues, I'm one of the new intakes for 2022, so this is all fairly new to me, and I look forward to working with colleagues on this scrutiny committee.
Wonderful. And last of all, but no means least, Councillor Wood.
Hi, good evening, madam. I'm Nick Wood. I'm I'm a 2022 entrant, new councillor for Cowbridge, out here in the Vale, and this is my first entry onto a scrutiny committee, so I'm really looking forward to working with everybody together to see what we can scrutinise.
That's fantastic. And thank you all for doing that. I know we used to call this the creeping death, but I felt that today especially, and as we can't all be together, and a lot of us are brand new, this was quite a helpful way for us to start bonding as a team. Anyway, so we'll swiftly move on, if we can, to the first thing on our agenda, which is the appointment of the Vice Chair for this committee. So can I start by asking if we have any nominations, please? Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Fat fingers, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Ewan Goodjohn, please.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I'd like to second that.
Okay, that's fantastic. Do we have any other nominations? No, I can't see any hands. None not waving or on the screen. That's fantastic. Thank you. So I can then move to say that Councillor Goodjohn, you have now become the Vice Chair. Do you have anything you want to say, or?
Look forward to working with you all.
Brilliant.
Especially you, Joe, as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you ever so much. Okay then, so that's one of the agenda sorted. Can we now move to agenda item 2, which is apologies for absence?
Chair, sorry, Councillor Carroll, sorry, just.
Sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, not an apology for absence so much, Chair, but I will have to leave the meeting at around 2:45, 10:50, so just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
No problem. Thank you for letting us know.
Thanks.
Mark?
Yeah, no problem, Chair. Just one apology for absence from Councillor Dr. Johnson, but I've seen Councillor Franks just wave, yes. So I guess, and he was going to say the same then, so I beat you to it. Sorry, Councillor.
You beat me to it.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for letting us know. Right then, so we now can swiftly move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes from the previous meeting. Hopefully everybody has read these. Most of us assembled here today wouldn't have been present. So can I ask those who were to endorse and second that they are an accurate representation of the meeting?
I'm happy to propose them, Chair.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll.
And I was the other person present, so I will second.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you both. Okay then, so we can now swiftly move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the declarations of interest. Does anybody have anything to declare? No? Wonderful. We are speeding through today. Right, on to agenda item number 5. Now I think we have a presentation for us all, an introduction to the committee, the Scrutiny Committee, and how it works. So it's over to Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, and good evening to all the members of the committee. Good to see you all this evening. I think, excellent, Mark has just put the presentation up on screen. I'm just going to walk you through a brief introduction and welcome to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee this evening. My name is Tom Bowering. I'm the Director of Corporate Resources. I'm joined on the call this evening by some of my colleagues, and I'll introduce those, if I may, Chair, later on in the presentation. So, on the next slide, we just thought we'd set a little bit of context for you in terms of the Scrutiny Committee. And as you know, the Council's vision is one of strong communities with a bright future. And when we talk about our vision, we think about it from the perspective of the outcomes that we want to see delivered. And those are shown on the screen here for you this evening. So we want to see an active and healthy Vale, an inclusive and safe Vale, a Vale that's environmentally responsible and prosperous, and also an aspirational and culturally vibrant Vale. And those outcomes in turn shape the objectives that we set ourselves, and I'll talk about those in a moment, and importantly the actions that we take and the decisions and scrutiny that we make of those. And on the next slide we just break that down in a little bit more detail. So our vision and outcomes all link to our contribution to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and that was introduced in 2015 and is something that's guided the work of this authority and also all public sector bodies in Wales since then. The work we do and the way that members make decisions and scrutinise those is enhanced by the Future Generations Act by using the 5 ways of working as a lens through which you can consider the different topics that are brought before you. So on this screen you can see that our vision of strong communities with a bright future is represented, and the outcomes are shown at the top. That wheel at the bottom is the 7 interconnected wellbeing goals for Wales, and those work in conjunction with one another, and they're the things that we're striving to deliver in all of the work that we do in the public sector. I mentioned the 5 ways of working as a lens through which you can scrutinise and take decisions, and the first of those is about thinking to the long term. We always have to balance the decisions that we're making in terms of the short-term impact, but also looking at the ability to safeguard future generations, so thinking in that longer-term time horizon. Prevention is a really important aspect of the Future Generations work, and this is about how do we spend resources or use resources now to prevent problems from happening again in the future. So that's really about taking early intervention activity in order to prevent something happening in the future. The third of the 5 ways of working is around integration, and by taking an integrated approach, the Act means thinking about the ability for us to take our decisions, but also what impact those decisions would have on other local authorities or public sector bodies and the work that they're trying to do. So I'll talk about integration a little bit more in the presentation. Collaboration is the 4th of the 5 ways of working, and that's about how we take collective action, whether that's with other public sector bodies, whether that's with the private sector, whether that's with our communities, but how we work together to help deliver well-being on a collective basis. And the 5th of the 5 ways of working is around involvement, and that talks about the importance of involving people who've got a stake in the decisions that we're making, in order to make sure that they have their voice heard and they can contribute to delivering those well-being goals as well. So the vision is what guides us. The outcomes locally are what we want to see delivered for citizens in the Vale of Glamorgan, and all of that is part of the 7 wellbeing goals for Wales that collectively we all strive for. The 5 ways of working are the means by which you can test whether the decisions and the actions that we're taking are the right ones to contribute up to those outcomes and ultimately to those goals. So that's a bit of the kind of strategic context, but the next slide is something that I wanted to show you that brings it back into the local context that your committee chair will be getting very familiar with in the coming months and years. So to deliver our vision and the outcomes that we want to see, we develop a 5-year corporate plan, and the current one runs from 2020 to 2025, and that sets out a series of commitments that over that 5-year period that we're making to improve wellbeing and show how we're going to work and use our resources to do that. And it does it by setting out these 4 cross-cutting wellbeing objectives, and they're the things that we want to do over the next 5 years in order to deliver wellbeing in the Vale of Glamorgan. So the first is about working with and for our communities, and that's about wanting to get people involved and letting them know about the work of the council. We want to take action to make sure that we're prepared for the future and to provide good customer service that meets different needs of different people in the Vale. We want to make sure that we can help more people to speak Welsh, and we want our staff and our elected members to be able to do their best. The second of those wellbeing objectives is around supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth. Within that objective, you'll see in the corporate plan a series of commitments around wanting to make sure that all children have the opportunity to learn in modern environments, giving people and businesses the support, advice and opportunities to help with jobs, money and skills that they need, and wanting people to be able to volunteer in different opportunities and make the Vale a better place to live, work and travel in. The third of our wellbeing objectives is around supporting people at their home and in their communities. And by this, we mean that we'd like to see people having a healthy and active lifestyle, encouraging walking, cycling and other modes of active travel, giving people the opportunity to enjoy leisure, arts and culture, and making sure that everybody gets the care and support that they need, keeping people safe at home and in their community with access to good quality housing. And the fourth of our objectives is particularly pertinent in the Vale of Glamorgan. We're blessed with very rich natural environment, and we want to respect, enhance and enjoy that. So we want to look after and protect the environment for now and also for future generations. We'll work with others to sustain those important local facilities such as parks and play areas. There are commitments, Chair, within the plan to reducing waste, lowering carbon emissions and reducing the negative impacts on the environment, as well as working to minimise pollution and flooding. And the commitments that we set ourselves in that 5-year plan are articulated in an annual delivery plan. And this is something that we introduced in 2020 directly in response to feedback from the public when we were developing our corporate plan for the 5 years. People were supportive of what we were setting out in terms of those commitments, but by their very nature, they're longer term in nature, and people were asking, what are you going to specifically do in the next 12 months that we can look at the end of that year and judge whether you've achieved them? And equally for elected members, especially at scrutiny committees such as yourselves, that's really important so that you can again look at what we're doing and make a judgment as to whether we're delivering our commitments. So this year's annual delivery plan contains a series of those commitments for the 2022-23 year, and specifically has 6 themes within it as well, which are shown on the screen here. And they show the areas that the council is going to place particular emphasis on in terms of activity during the coming year. They're around Project Zero, so our commitment to decarbonising the authority by 2030 and contributing to the reduction in carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. The second is around building community capacity, so recognising the strength of our communities and their ability to step up that we've seen so much in the last couple of years during the pandemic, and empowering them to have a voice and an ability to deliver services at the most local of levels. The third of the themes, Chair, is around hardship, which is particularly pertinent given the pressures on cost of living for people. So you see commitments within that to provide advice, support for some of our most vulnerable people, and aligned with that, an emphasis on care and support. And within this, we talk about post-pandemic support for children and young people in terms of mental health. We also talk about older people in terms of domiciliary care, and creating safe neighbourhoods for people to live in. The fifth of the themes is around transformation. The Vale of Glamorgan has got a good pedigree in terms of being fit for the future, and we don't rest on our laurels. So there are a series of commitments to making sure the organisation is fit for the future. And then finally, a series of commitments around infrastructure. So looking at continuing to deliver the modernisation of schools, and also using the Westminster funding through shared prosperity and levelling up. I don't know if you wanted me to stop at that point. Councillor Franks had indicated to speak.
Thank you. I hope it's okay to cut you off in mid-flow. I haven't had an opportunity to read either of these documents, so this has been a prompt for me to so do. But I'd like to pose some questions. I got three, I think. You've made reference to encouraging people to walk, active travel. Well, I've seen very little evidence that the authority does in fact do that. And I'm obviously going to reference my area. It's a tremendous challenge to get footpaths maintained across the countryside in a timely manner. Sooner or later, the work is done in part or in whole, but there doesn't seem to be much of a priority. You mentioned flooding. Well, we suffered terrible flooding in Dinas Powys, and I'm afraid the Vale has not been very prominent in reacting to the problems of the victims. And you also mentioned helping pupils in school, I think with reference to COVID. Shall I say, now we're almost getting back to normal. There are still lots of problems in schools, and I'm not aware of the Vale helping the youngsters who've been so adversely affected. No, we as an authority are not helping those children very much. Now, hopefully on all three, you'll prove me wrong, but I thought this is an opportunity for me to raise it and either have an answer now or whenever you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks.
I don't know how to put my hand down. Hang on.
If you go to reactions,
I've done it.
Yeah, you're okay?
It's done now, Councillor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
we'll quickly take one more question. Councillor Lovelock Edwards had put her hand up, but if we could then go back to Tom's presentation and save any further questions till he's finished, if that's possible. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask that if that would be possible, that would if we move on to the completion of the presentation. However, I just wanted to sort of counter something that Councillor Frank said, and that is I work for an education trade union, and obviously we have witnessed more than anyone the challenges that face in schools. And what Councillor Frank says in terms of not supporting pupils, I don't quite see in terms of the feedback that we're getting from teachers. But that's, I think, something for a wider or further debate. But I don't necessarily agree with Councillor Frank's statement there.
Okay, thank you for the record. Is it okay now if we can go back to Tom's presentation, everybody? Thanks ever so much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chair. And just in conclusion, in terms of this particular slide, and then I'll answer Councillor Frank's questions at the end with your permission. So you'll see within the annual delivery plan those 6 themes, as I say, and they are about the actions that we take now in the next 12 months in order to deliver our vision and contribute to those commitments that you can see in the corporate plan for the 5-year period. And if we can move on to the next slide, please, Mark. This slide will show you specifically the remit of this particular scrutiny committee. So I talked earlier about the 4 outcomes that we want to see delivered for the Vale of Glamorgan, and I know that members will have seen that they very neatly align with each of the other outcome-based scrutiny committees. So an aspirational and culturally vibrant Vale, for example, maps directly across to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee, and it's the same for the other 3 outcomes. So within each of those 4 scrutiny committees, they'll be looking through the lens of the particular outcomes that they want to achieve. Corporate performance and resources is a little bit different. I would say special because it's my home scrutiny committee. And the reason for that is because you have overall oversight of the delivery of the council's vision and therefore those 4 other outcomes. So your committee chair will see performance reports at the end of the cycle. And the purpose of that is to allow you to take an integrated look across the delivery of all of those in order to scrutinise the activity of the council's delivery of our corporate plan. So to make the connection between services and our wellbeing outcomes, we do align certain council functions most closely with a particular scrutiny committee. That means there is accountability maintained between services and scrutiny committees. But you'll see that they're done in different combinations because all services contribute ultimately to each of our outcome areas, and they form a bridge between the collections of services and what we want to see in those overarching commitments in the annual delivery plan. So this committee's remit is to ensure, as I say, the overall delivery of the corporate plan objectives and wellbeing outcomes. The specific services and functions are shown on the screen here, so including corporate policy, legal services, customer relations, finance, property, capital schemes, etc. So throughout the term, Chair, you will get reports to your scrutiny committee aligned with those. You'll also receive, as the other scrutiny committees do, a quarterly performance report. We take the same report to each of the 5 scrutiny committees so that you can see the progress that is being made in delivering that corporate plan holistically. But what we will also do is produce a presentation that looks through the lens of those particular services, specifically at the areas of that performance report which are pertinent to your scrutiny committee. So that shows that integration in terms of the way that all scrutiny committees work together and are focused ultimately on delivering our wellbeing objectives. The next slide, which I'll ask Mark to put up briefly, but if I may also then take down briefly, and we'll circulate this to elected members. This slide gives you a list of the senior team who are behind each of those functions. And you'll be getting to know this set of colleagues and others throughout the term. But I know I'm joined this evening by a few of my colleagues who are listed on that screen. So I'm wondering whether, with your permission, Chair, if Mark takes that slide down and my colleagues could put their cameras on, and we'll introduce ourselves in a little bit more detail, if I may. So if I may hand over to Debbie first.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, I'm Debbie Moles. I'm the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services. I think everybody on the call will recognise me, having attended the Ethics and Standards training. So thank you for attending that. So within my remit, I have responsibility for a number of legal services teams. So community services legal team covering advice on adult social services, children's services and education, the property and contract legal team, and also the litigation team. So we advise on criminal litigation, civil litigation matters, employment law and housing law. I also have responsibility for the information governance team and also democratic services, so both scrutiny support, member support and also cabinet support. We also have responsibility for the RMU, the Records Management Unit and local land charges, and last but not least also the electoral registration services team comes within my remit. So that just hopefully gives you a feel for the areas of responsibility that come within my remit.
Thank you, Debbie. And if I may hand over to Tracy next.
Hi, sorry, I'm having connection problems, so I'm actually dialing in off my phone, so I'm hoping you can hear me okay. So I'm Tracy Dickinson, I'm Head of Human Resources and OD, So my responsibility includes human resources, occupational health, health and safety, payroll, recruitment, etc. And I'm supported by Lace, who also joins us on the call.
Thank you, Tracy. And last but not least, Laith.
Yeah, hi, good evening. As Tracy just said, actually, yes, I'm Laith Bonney. I'm the HR operational manager for employee services. So, as you say, my remit, obviously, with Tracy managing the whole function, I look after the, I suppose, day-to-day operations within payroll, recruitment, job evaluation, a lot of staff data and information, but also have day-to-day responsibility for occupational health and safety. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Laith, and thank you, Debbie, Tracy and Laith, for introducing yourselves. In the next couple of months, Chair, you'll be getting to know lots of the other colleagues that were listed on that slide, notably my finance colleagues will be with me next month as well when we're bringing you reports on that agenda. So if I may finally just close with a slide, Mark, if we could pop that one back up. And the slide here, we just wanted to extend a few notes in terms of how we can best support you, Chair, at committee. So at each meeting, the relevant cabinet member or members and chief officers will be in attendance to present any of the reports and to answer any questions that you may have. If any questions arise from those papers when the agendas go out that are particularly technical or very specific, it's great if members are able to let Democratic Services know so that we can make sure that we research those specific or technical answers prior to the committee so that we can give those to you. I mentioned earlier about the quarterly performance reports. They are by their very nature incredibly wide-ranging. They cover every council service. So if you've got any particular queries on those about any of the specific actions, again, it's great if you're able to let Democratic Services colleagues know, because we can make sure that the right colleagues are in attendance at the committee to be able to answer those. And then just finally, we'll always be honest, if we don't know the answer at the meeting, we will commit to finding it and providing it by email to all committee members very shortly after that meeting. So I hope that that's a useful initial introduction to your Scrutiny Committee, Chair. We're very much looking forward to working with all members in the coming years.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Tom. Helpful introduction and very enlightening for all of us new members, I am sure. I know we had a couple of questions that Councillor Franks wanted to pose. If you are able to answer some of those now, if they're relevant to this, then that would be fantastic. And after that, then we will just open the floor with other questions.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Chair. With your permission, Councillor Franks, what I can do is I can send, I can ask Mark to send out the Q3 performance report that was reported to committees prior to the election. That would give an update. During July, though, Chair, we are going to be bringing the quarterly or end-of-year performance report to the committees, and that would give the most up-to-date updates against each of the actions. And there are commitments, as Councillor Franks queried, around active travel, maintenance of footpaths, flooding alleviation schemes, and also in terms of the pupil support post-COVID. So perhaps it would be just a useful mechanism for Councillor Franks to be able to have access to the information. And then clearly, if there are any further questions, we could take them next month.
Okay, thank you for your consideration. Hopefully, I'll get the information from the reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks.
That's great. Thank you ever so much. We have a query from Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's really a follow-up question from what Councillor Franks was raising, and it's sort of to do with making sure that when we have objectives that we look at them in the big picture, really. The reason I say this, Councillor Franks was talking about public footpaths, and I can think of an example in my own ward. The footpath in question runs from Leckwith Road to Penarth Road, and it runs through woodlands, so that's not going to mean much to most people on the call, I'm sure. But the point is, the path in question is very dark, especially at winter. It's not lit, and it runs to both Coventry Station and also to a bus route on Penarth Road. And I've asked several times over the years for the council to consider installing lighting on that route. And one of the reasons the council gave me for not installing lighting on the route was that it would go against the council's climate change objectives. Now, obviously, if that's an active travel route, you need to encourage people to use that route and need to encourage them, and they need to feel safe to be able to do that. So really, my point is, it's important that when reasons are cited for not doing something, they are actually the real reasons, if you like, because to me that made absolutely no sense whatsoever, in that people aren't going to, you want people to use active travel routes, it would fulfill one of your objectives, but if they don't feel safe, they're not going to, and they will get in the car. So it was just really to place that on the record and see whether that could be fed back in.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Councillor Carroll. Do we have any other queries or questions now for Tom on that presentation? Anybody? No? Oh, hang on. Councillor Wilson?
Hello, can you give me permission so I can speak? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Please fire away.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, as rightly says on this last slide, I'm one of the cabinet members. I am responsible for neighbourhood services and building services, but occasionally, as you are well aware, corporate resources, the overarching committee. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm also accountable to Scrutiny's committees, and so anyone who wants to raise a question, they can either email me, or I would try to go as many meetings as possible. But I do think it's important that we've done an awful lot of work during the pandemic and supported an awful lot of people. And I know that we had a very difficult time, as you probably appreciate, especially during the early part of 2020, when this pandemic really arrived all of a sudden, and the council really stepped up to the mark. And I'd like to assure you that if the pandemic comes again, and I'm sure we're in a very good place to support the people of the Vale Glamorgan. Could you thank you also for my indulgence of addressing the committee, and I wish you well, and the new vice chair and the rest of the committee in looking at the various agenda items that you will have in your time as chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Do we now have any other questions now for Tom? No? That's fantastic. Okay then, so if we can then move on to agenda item number 6, which is the sickness absence reporting 2021-22. For reference, this went to Cabinet on the 9th of June. We were looking at an increase of sick absence, which is on a similar level to 2019-2020. It's gone from 8.59 days per full-time equivalent to 11.35 days. And the annual target for this was 9.20. So there has been quite an increase, and we are now going to hand over to Leith, who is going to take us through the full report. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Did you want to share my screen, Mark? Is that easier?
Yeah, if you can, Leith, if that's easier for you to do. It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, I can do that. Save me saying to you, stop and carry on. So great. Okay, so hopefully you can see that first page.
Yeah, it's coming through, Leith. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it takes a few seconds. Okay. Right. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the introduction there. You're quite right in saying, obviously, this I think it's worth mentioning, I suppose, that we do produce these reports on a 6-monthly basis, again, to keep Cabinet and Scrutiny informed, obviously, of the Council's position in relation to our sickness levels and also the support that we are providing our employees and managers. The report has been developed over the past few years, again, with support and feedback from Scrutiny. The report probably looks a lot different to when we first started, 3-4 years ago when I commenced with the council. And I think I've had a lot of feedback in terms of the data, how we should present it, and again that shouldn't change, and we need to review and continue to adapt the report as we go forward. So as you mentioned, Chair, that the overall figure is 11.35 days at the end of last year. Appreciate we were still in the throes of the pandemic, and actually I think we were ultimately fairly comfortable, I think, with that figure at the end of the year. There was highlighted earlier in the year that could have been higher, but actually ending on 11.35 is actually a positive. You mentioned the target figure of 9.2. We almost kept the target figure similar to previous years because it was very difficult to work out a target figure during the middle of a pandemic. So we actually kept the target figure the same for the last 3 years, and that's something again we can consider going forward. What I'll do is actually just highlight just a few sections of the report, rather than running through all sort of 14 pages, because I'm sure everyone will want to go home as well. So we mentioned the target figures here. I think also in terms of this data, I think it's useful to explain about where we are with the schools information, because schools make up 50% of the council's workforce. So actually with the schools having a good or bad year in terms of absence, that can actually throw the whole corporate sort of council-wide figures sort of dramatically. So again, obviously with higher rates of absence due to COVID, that's probably had the overall effect of higher rates across the council. But it's just bearing in mind again that our workforce is split roughly between 50% schools and 50% sort of corporate departments. Okay, I just go through. I'm going to jump to 4.8 if that's okay. What this explains is that actually our most common reason for absence within the authority is non-work related stress, which accounts for just under 25% of our absence. And again, there's a whole host of information you can decide to sort of peruse at your leisure, that explains obviously the different rates. And again, we've done comparisons back to 2019-20. Just again, the last couple of years have obviously been through a pandemic, which has thrown up a lot of different figures within our data. So we've kept in the 2019-20 data just as a comparison for a year without COVID. So again, so there's lots of information there in terms of our absences, again split between short term and long term. What this does show is that our long term absence is 75% of all sickness. Normally, I would say as an average, we're running at around 70% for long term and 30% short term. So again, we've still got a slight increase in our long term absence, but that has dropped again from 81% for last year, which again, hopefully we're moving in the right direction and back to where our figures would normally be. What the next slide show, paragraphs 4.12 here down all the way to 4.16, is our top 5 reasons of absence for each of our directorates. So we've got environment and housing. Again, probably no surprise that it's got a front-facing sort of area with waste and those sort of areas. So you'd expect obviously musculoskeletal to have higher level absence and so on. So what we've got are the top 5 reasons, again, within environment and housing, within learning and skills, obviously managing director and resources, social services, and finally schools as well. So again, I'm not going to go through all the data in detail because we could be here for some time. What we also have is a bit of an age group sort of comparison. Again, I think that was requested as part of previous scrutiny meetings. Again, just give an overview of the amount of days lost per staff within the age groups as well. And again, it's no surprise actually that the older you are within those groups, the higher the FTE days lost per person. Always treat the last column with a bit of caution because we've only got 93 full-time equivalents of age 65 and over, so sometimes that does skew the figures a little bit. But again, it's just being mindful of obviously what we're trying to do, I suppose, to support our staff, especially when like all councils and businesses are facing, you know, an aging population and aging workforce. We've got a section here in terms of obviously the impact of COVID for our sickness figures over the last couple of years, with obviously restrictions coming and going and changes to the work and support for our staff as well, and talking about some of the initiatives sort of, you know, I suppose that we're trying to offer our teams, especially with a lot more hybrid and home working as well, that we're considering on what that looks like for the future. There's always been quite a bit of discussion, I suppose, in our scrutiny meetings around, I'll highlight the word there, in terms of presenteeism, where I suppose with a lot of home working and hybrid working, where we found, I suppose, evidence or anecdotal evidence that staff have been working whilst probably not well enough to do so. I suppose where staff would have in the future or in the past, sorry, had to travel to work to undertake their job, they may have actually decided, actually I can't travel to work, I'm going to take some time off or sick. But actually working from home changes that dynamic, about that ability to make that decision about whether I should be sick or not. So actually what we've done surrounding that question, because, you know, obviously it's quite an important aspect, I think, of that work-life balance and making sure we're not expecting people to work when they're unwell. We've actually got a staff wellbeing survey going to be launched very shortly, hopefully towards the end of this month. And there'll be specific questions there on how people have worked over the last sort of 12, 24 months. Have they worked when they've been unwell? How that has affected them. So hopefully we'll get a bit more sort of data in terms of analysing and managing that sort of presenteeism sort of aspect. And I think that's really important with how we're looking after our staff, especially from the well-being perspective. I'm going to jump to 4.24. In the council we have an employee assistance programme. There's support there for staff who require anything from counselling or debt management, you know, all aspects of, I suppose, that employee assistance really. We've had our current provider. I think we use Care First as the provider for that. We've used them for a number of years, but actually it's probably time for a review of our you know, employee assistance programme offering, because things have changed over the years, and I think COVID has changed the way that people access and use these provisions. So again, we're just going to start hopefully a review shortly in terms of how we're providing support and assistance to our employees as well. I'm going to jump now to, again, obviously there's been a lot of positive sort of health promotion again during the last couple of years specifically. One really important thing actually that was still managed quite effectively was still offering flu vaccinations to our staff as well, and we offered or provided just under 2,000 flu vaccinations to our staff towards the end of last year. And again, during the pandemic, where obviously providing sort of vaccinations where people have been going through the COVID vaccination process, and also obviously from the staff perspective, managing the resources and supply issues of getting flu vaccinations. I think that was a really positive sort of effort again from our occupational health team. So I must sort of congratulate them for managing that process and getting those vaccinations out. Also, what we've commenced recently, and actually we had a session this morning, was our new menopause sort of sessions for staff, and again that's been going really well, and again it's another thing that we can support again our staff with. And then finally, is going to jump again to paragraph 4.29. Again, it's about that performance management, how we're managing our absence as well. We send a lot of data again to our managers, to our senior leadership team, obviously now again to Cabinet and Scrutiny. So it's again just keeping that information out there, how we're managing absence, how we can support managers. And actually we work really closely with our trade unions colleagues as well in terms of managing our cases and getting their support. You know, in terms of how we're dealing with absence to get staff back to work as quickly and as reasonably as possible. You know, generally, I say we've got a very good working relationship with our trade unions, and hope again that continues sort of again. So that's it mainly from the report. What I think what I was hoping also to provide this time, but I think because we're now only in June with the data only just being provided, we were going to try and get our sickness data comparative to other Welsh authorities. So we're just about sort of trying to gather that data to see where we sit within the table. But I know that's been requested previously from Scrutiny, so hopefully we can either provide that data shortly or at the next meeting. What I wanted, I'll come back in the room. What I wanted to explain, I suppose, is a word of caution, I suppose, when we try and, I suppose, match data with other councils, I suppose, with the other 22 authorities, is that we're all councils, we all operate services, but it's not really matching, as you say, apples with apples and so on, because there's a lot of authorities, all different sizes. Some of them have outsourced some of their sort of areas, such as waste and other sort of sections. So as a Vale Council, of course, you know, we operate our internal sort of services with waste and catering and cleaning, residential homes. So actually we've got a workforce that probably actually takes more sickness than other parts of the workforce. It's just the nature of the work, isn't it? If you're a frontline worker working outdoors in all weathers, the likely is, yes, you're going to get injured or you're going to get more absence. So when you see other authorities with really low absence, there's usually a lot more of a story behind it than just a basic sort of absence figure. But that's fine. But again, we can provide that information and maybe some context about where the differences sort of are as well. So anyway, there's a very quick run through the absence report, and again, happy to take any questions either from myself or Tracy as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that report, Laith. And I think that though it's helpful to be able to compare, as you said, it's really what others might be doing if they have very, very low comparable levels of sickness, and that's the detail, really, isn't it? I understand that sickness has gone up considerably, hasn't it? You know, 35% is a really big increase in a year, and that there may be reasons for this. But what I was wondering before we open up to everybody, and there are lots of people who want to ask you questions, is there any evaluation of the data to actually show that your employee assistance program works, and that the initiatives, you know, to do with presentism actually works as well? Because I think that's quite key to all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. Do you want to answer the questions as they come along, or do you want to work our way through. I'll do them at the end, but I'm happy.
Yeah.
No, you're quite right. The presenteeism bit is always a question that's really difficult to answer, and I think hopefully the staff survey will help us, I think, gather that data a bit better. Only because it's, I suppose, we've all been in meetings like we are now, and we've seen people turn off their cameras because they said I'm too ill to show my face, or so it's more about anecdotal stuff that we know that's happening, but we haven't really quantified it in terms of, as you say, in terms of the data. So hopefully, again, the staff survey will actually give us a bit of that information. Say, actually, yeah, X staff have completed the survey, and X percentage have said, yes, I have worked so many days when I've been ill, or I shouldn't have worked. And hopefully that will give us some element of how big the problem is. And then that's obviously then we can use that to tackle what we do next, isn't it? Because this is all, as you say, it's all about the data and how we can manage that. And your question about the employee assistance programme, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think at the moment we get some really good feedback and at the same time, actually, we've also had some not very good experiences also. Depends on the individual circumstances or how they've managed to get through to the call line that we're operating that service. And I think things have changed, I think, in terms of how people access these services. So I think it's definitely something we would like to review and make sure we get a really good quality sort of programme in place that complements the stuff we're doing within our health and safety teams and wellbeing and our OC health department as well. It's all, to me, it's all got to work together.
That's great. Now, I'm not sure who was first, so I think I'm just going to go who's top of this list, which is Councillor Haynes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Just a couple of things, if you don't mind, and thanks for the presentation. On your data, you don't show what percentage of the staff are working at home when they report in sick, which distinctly skews the data. Also, which I think in any future data should be shown, because apparently we're supposed to be more productive at home, and if we're being sick when we're more productive, it has a greater effect on productivity. Also, I have a slight issue with this anecdotal data, and please understand I come from an engineering background, so data is data. Anecdotal data shows no evidence at all. It is hearsay, and as such, you should gather the data in a very effective way, more effective way than a staff survey, because that's going to show more skewed data. If you're going to take the skewed data, you're going to have to take the skew into account, and you can't quantify that. Also, you say it's very hard to compare. There are known ways of standardizing data within industry, and I think just a quick phone call to Cardiff University would probably help you with that. Thank you. You're still muted.
Thank you.
I had to do it, didn't I? I had to do it at least once today. Sorry, everybody. Thank you anyway, again, Councillor Haynes. You will learn how to lip read probably as we go on if I keep doing this. Can we now go to Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I'll echo Councillor Haynes' comments for the presentation. I've also got a couple of questions, and the level of absence, in particular around social services and environment and housing. Is there any correlation between sort of information that we've received in a separate scrutiny committee around staffing, recruitment and retention being an issue? And you touched on the menopause cafe, and I was pleased to see that. I was just saddened I was in another meeting, as I would have liked to have popped in. But what steps, seeing as this is quite an important facet of your programme of work for the next year, certainly, what steps are being taken by sort of to encourage local management to have those discussions so that women are able or feel confident to openly cite perimenopause or menopause as a condition for or a reason for their absence. And then the third one was around non-work related stress, and I appreciate, without sort of breaching anyone's privacy, that seems quite a generic sort of reason for absence. And is there any sort of plans to sort of dig deeper into that non-work related stress, and is there any way that you could sort of establish if that's a specific gender issue or not? Again, I'm conscious that you don't want to breach anyone's right to privacy, but it seems that it's quite a significant percentage, and non-work related stress is something that perhaps we can't legislate for, but certainly it would be good to understand from a scrutiny committee how that is impacting on absence in the workplace. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can try and pick up some of those sort of issues now, but I think some we may have to come back to or build into future sort of reports. You're quite right in terms of social services and environment, housing, and actually it's not just those areas. Actually, now we seem to be having recruitment retention issues now a bit more across the board. We used to have the shortage occupations, your children's social workers, your planners, your IT jobs. And you could quite sort of, you would know where your issues, I suppose, were within your recruitment sort of issue. But over the last couple of years, they seem to be much broader in terms of recruitment retention. Seems to be affecting, a lot of the vacancies, all the jobs that we're trying to fill in the department. So you're quite right. I mean, it is going to have an effect, isn't it, on the teams? If you can't recruit, that's going to push work onto other staff members, and it snowballs, isn't it? So you're quite right, that's something we're looking at. We're also looking at our recruitment and attraction strategy as well. So we're just hopefully finalising that very shortly. So again, to see how we can attract sort of workers into work. It's not just about the money, even though that's obviously important. There's a lot more things we can do. There's lots of things we offer in authority. It's about selling that and making sure that we're telling them the benefits of coming in to work for the council. It's the training, it's the opportunities, it's the benefits, the pension. It's much broader, so the salary becomes a less crucial bit, but clearly still important as well. So obviously the non-work related stress sort of question. Yeah, again, you're quite right. All those, I suppose, headings, they're all driven by Welsh Government in terms of we have to record them under those headings because it's reported Wales-wide, and we're a little bit limited, I suppose, in terms of how we record it. And actually, from a Welsh Government perspective, they just record it as stress. We've actually split it between work and non-work, at least to get some element of where that sickness started. Appreciate stress affects both, doesn't it? If you get stress in work, it affects your home, but if you get stress at home, it affects your work. So, but it was the best way we could do it in terms of managing that reporting. But you're right. There probably is some further analysis we can do as part of that data. You're right. We probably can't go down too far because you start identifying individuals or teams and stuff. But I'm sure we can look at maybe some of the higher absence categories like non-work related stress or musculoskeletal, and maybe doing a few more I suppose, yeah, delving a bit deeper into those areas, and I'm sure we can consider that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, can we have Councillor Wood, please? I think you were next.
Yes. Good evening. Some of that you just covered, but excuse me if I'm interpreting the data wrong, but if I look at 410 and you look at the total long-term absences, it seems that there's been an enormous increase in stress, and that many other of the sectors that you've measured are flat or have decreased. So it would appear that, and I can understand, yes, absolutely, we've had a very stressful time, and as you said, work stress and non-work stress can sometimes be interrelated. But when I don't know about the head count that maybe within the council, because obviously if the headcount increases, you will have a necessary increase. But when you go from 2019 of 7,290 to 9,000, and then it may be the third measure, but it goes from 3,000 to 5,000. But when you look at a lot of the other categories, they're flat or not showing any increase. It would appear that for all the efforts that we have in the plan to do things concerning this or that or this or that, stress would appear to be the overwhelming cause of the increase. And thus, am I right when I say long term, you measure that as 4 weeks absence? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Is that 4 weeks continuous absence or 4 weeks across the year?
No, 4 weeks continuous.
4 weeks continuous absence. I understand, that's a very significant absence. And when it adds up to 30% of the entire absence of the long-term issues, it's because there's an awful lot of things in here we can't do much about. Obviously, viral infections are viral infections. Stomach ailments are stomach ailments. But that is one issue that I think, obviously, as previous councillors mentioned, we have to protect people's privacy. But that data needs to be drilled down into to really try to identify. And it, of course, on an individual basis, use an HR manager, and the HR group have to maintain the people's privacy. But it's growing. But so that it may only represent 29% of the total, but it's an increase from 7,000 to 9,000. It's a massive, massive increase, and probably makes up, I don't know, half of the total increase in the numbers. So if we could drill down and get as much detail as possible, it would help the council and us to come up with potential ideas to reduce it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Nothing to disagree against that at all. Obviously, from a work perspective, we do work closely with managers, on a regular basis to manage obviously all their absences. As we got a HR business partner team that work obviously closely with managers. There's also a number of health and safety committees that we attend, where we take that data for those directorates in a bit more detail to the management teams to discuss those things. But you're quite right, from a scrutiny perspective, I'm sure we can look at that data. And you're right, it's obviously, it has been as we know, this is a report on the second year of COVID, and from my perspective, I think it'll be interesting what the next 6 months looks like. Has that reduced? If not, why? And you're right, and it's something that we'll continue to sort of monitor anyway. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Wood. And it is true, isn't it? Even though we are coming out of COVID, that trajectory isn't good. So yes, I think further analysis would be really helpful. Next, please, can we have Councillor Goodjohn?
Hi, can I just quickly come in on Councillor Wood's point that if you were to look a little bit deeper into the data tables, that a large amount of the increase in raw numbers for stress absences seems to come from schools, which is in line with the general increase in absences across the board. So that's a large part of it. But also to come in that there are two specific points in the data, which now in retrospect, I should have emailed in, and I expect you can't answer these now. But there are two particular points of concern which are listed in the report, which is an increase, a doubling in the last 2 years of work-related stress in environment and housing, and a doubling in work and non-work related stress in social services. So is there any way we can get any further report into those specific numbers, because they are quite concerning increase of 1,000 and 2,000 respectively?
Yeah, thank you. I think we can probably do the same. I think what we'll do is, I suppose, like you've said, if there's any specific increases or the higher absence levels in, as you say, whether it's schools or environments, etc., that we can actually delve a little bit deeper into that, up to a point where we then don't identify any individuals. So I suppose it's just getting that balance sort of right. But so we meet with social services, health and safety committee, we go through that data. And yeah, it is. I think it's just putting it into context of where we are in terms of coming out of the pandemic. People have had a huge, difficult time over the last 2 years. You know, I think we've done an amazing job to try and support our staff through that. A number of initiatives. There was, increases in different payments to staff. We had the Welsh Government payment to the social care workforce. I think that was made on 3 different occasions. So I think there's lots of initiatives out there, but again, it's about managing how we I suppose manage that within the Vale. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Laith and Councillor Goodjohn. We've now got Councillor Burnett. Yes, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for joining on my phone. I was late getting back from work. It's been a really interesting discussion this evening, and you know, as it was my report, it's something that I care passionately about. But I think what I try not to forget in amongst this report is that behind all these statistics are people. So we might look at the sickness or the absence statistics. These are people who are unwell. They are people who have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic. We might have high levels of musculoskeletal issues. Well, actually, if you've been a carer, lifting people, moving people, if you've been one of our refuse, waste and recycling teams, who, apart from a slight glitch with the green waste recycling over the last couple of weeks, have delivered a phenomenal service right the way through the last couple of years without us having to cancel anything. And so I think an awful lot of people, we read in the news about the issues of mental health, and maybe there's an issue of having stress or mental health put down as stress, because there are so many issues that people are facing at the moment, and we wouldn't put somebody down with a virus if they've broken their arm. You know, physical ailments tend not to get lumped together in the same way that mental health does, and so we need to drill down. I think a lot of us have spoken to members of staff that have received support through the employee support service, and it is really good to know whether it's a work-related sort of cause of stress, or whether it's sort of home or out of work. But at the end of the day, if your work-life balance goes out of kilter, then you need help, you need support to get that in. And I think it's really good that our employee support service doesn't discriminate in terms of what the type of stress is if people need support. Because again, also, while people have been working, they also, like the general population, have been trying to homeschool, have been trying to care for family members and doing various things. So I think first and foremost, we need to make sure that we are supporting our employees. And then we do need to drill down in these figures. And I've been very encouraged by some of the discussion that we've had today. I think that we need to take as much notice of the quantitative data as the qualitative, and vice versa, because the background to people's stories is very important to be able to get a full background understanding of where the difficulties are, and pure numbers aren't going to do that for us. So it would be really good if this could come back, when we bring future reports back to this committee, if we could spend a little bit of time actually really drilling down into them to see whether or not there are any other interventions that we can take to support our staff. So thank you for the opportunity today, Chair.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. I think next we've got Tracy Dickinson. Her hand is up. Tracy?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? Because I too am on my mobile phone. I just wanted to seek to give this committee reassurance, really, in terms of we had anticipated our absence increasing after COVID, and it's very much in the way in which Councillor Burnett describes, a lot of these individuals have worked in a sustained way during a very traumatic time at the front line of the delivery of services to those most vulnerable. So we always kind of estimated that that would likely give an increase in our sickness absence, particularly around stress and anxiety. And we are anticipating that that may increase due to cost of living pressures that everyone is facing as we move forward into the next couple of months. The reassurance I suppose I wanted to give is that we are very active in this space at ensuring that our offering, as in employee support offering, is at the forefront of what everyone else is being able to offer as well. So we are speaking to professionals in many different areas, both medical professionals and also psychiatric professionals, trauma professionals, to ensure that we are offering a range of services to our employees to help them in the best way that they can. So we've linked in with our schools teams to offer the trauma-informed training that they give across schools to our employees via a webinar that's accessible in their own time privately if they wish to do so, but also with their colleagues if they wish to have colleague peer-to-peer support to be able to do that. And that's a programme that's at the forefront of delivery of resilience and well-being for employees who've experienced a traumatic period of time. We're also offering physical well-being sessions, physical fitness sessions, mental health well-being sessions, and financial well-being sessions as well, in terms of support for individuals who are having to make tough decisions financially. So I was really just seeking to reassure this group that we continue to try to innovate in this space and try to support where we can. It's very difficult then to say what difference that has made in the absence statistics, because we don't know what would have been before against kind of where we are now. What we do see in our statistics when we look at our surveys is very positive feedback from our employees in the programmes that we're offering and how they feel in terms of their workplace, how satisfied they are with their role, how supported they feel by their line manager, how trusted they feel to do their role. And I think those are really important messages, because otherwise we could be in a worse position where we are facing significantly worse work-related stress that we're having to deal with. And it's important that all our managers continue to give those supportive messages to staff. So thank you for the opportunity of letting me just provide that reassurance, if you like, Chair, to this committee. And we'll bring back more detailed data for the team to be able to look at without going into personal details of individuals for forthcoming committees.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tracy. That was really helpful. And Mark, would you like to speak to Councillor Wilson? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to first of all thank Leif for his report. It's very comprehensive. We had it at Cabinet and I thought it was very, very thorough. But obviously it does reveal that we have got an increase in sickness absence. But there are some very good reasons for it. I mean, lots of our workers have worked exceedingly hard over the pandemic period of time. And clearly, lots of them are very exhausted. I know in my service area in particular, and you mentioned green waste already, a lot of those people have been working quite long hours to clear backlogs, and obviously that has a toll on people. And we are addressing that. We are recruiting more staff, and hopefully that sickness absence will go down in those areas. But obviously we're dealing with people who have do very physically demanding jobs. And also they also got the stresses of other aspects of their life, not just their professional life, but their personal life as well. So, I think context is very important here, but I can assure you as the Cabinet member in that area that I will discuss any sort of increase in sickness absence with my director, Mr. Miles Punter, because it is important that we get on top of this, that we're trying to make sure that we have the right employee assistance program, that in any reviews that these issues are identified and what support we can give, because I think it's important that we think about not just the physical health, but also the mental health of our employees. and I can assure you that I will be keeping a very close watching brief on this, and I'm sure with the other couple of members. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Wilson, for that. I think what we can all take from this presentation is that everybody does care that we have seen a 35% increase in sick absence, even though we feel that, you know, we understand maybe anecdotally why this is happening, and that, you know, we are going to dig a little bit deeper to see exactly in which areas of pressure. But it is important that we do something to try and address this, because we can't really tolerate very high levels of absence because of the pressure it puts on everybody else who is still, you know, trying to cover maybe 2 jobs instead of 1, and that just creates more stress, and it becomes kind of like a vicious circle, doesn't it? So so I think it is right that we do this, and we do ask for some further detailed reports, so that Cabinet can have another look, and hopefully, as we are here to be critical friends, that we will help to find solutions, and I think that's all that we can do, isn't it? So have we got anybody else who would like to raise questions or to recommend anything else on this particular topic? No? Okay.
No, Chair.
That's wonderful. So we've got a couple of recommendations that we would like to make to go back to Cabinet, if that's okay. There was a recommendation of a further report to show if it's possible, I don't know if it is, Laith, out of those sick absences, which ones are for people who are working at home and which ones are working you know, in an office environment. Not sure if that's something that can be done, Laith, but if so, just to, you know, to have a little look. We also wanted further reports, if possible, to see if there was a correlation between the areas where we have skill shortages and issues of recruitment and retention on those areas with sick absence. And there were a couple of areas, weren't there, that Councillor Goodjohn pointed out where we had higher levels of sickness as well. So if it was possible to, you know, to dig a little bit deeper into those particular areas. So that our colleagues in Cabinet can have another little look at those particular areas. That would be marvellous. Oh, hang on, I've got another hand up. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
Yeah, sorry, Chair.
That's okay.
There was just to give you a gentle nudge. We also, or I asked about the link with menopause,
yeah.
And if there were plans for how you scrutinise, analyse, or open up the debate around encouraging women to cite that perimenopause and menopause as a sickness absence, and if it's on any templates or forms, in particular return to work templates. Thank you, Chair.
That's okay, and thank you. You can nudge me all you like. It's that's perfectly fine by me. And Councillor Wood, yes.
Forgive me if this is inappropriate to come in at the end, but in terms of the long-term absences, obviously that's a minimum of 4 weeks. But I think it would be very useful to know, I don't know, 4-week absence, what duration, because the numbers have grown so much. If an extra 50 people are off for 28 days, that's 1,000 days. Or is it manifested in 20 people being off for 3 months? I think it's important, sector by, you know, in area by area, to work out. We have musculoskeletal going up. Are those absences down to 3 people or 30 people? We don't really know. Yeah. Of course, this is people behind all of this, and it would help to know if it was spread around so many people or confined to a relatively few. Yes. I think it's important.
Yeah.
To get the data at least.
Yeah, can I just come in on that? I suppose, yes, we could. I suppose I was thinking in terms of long term, we could do anyone from, I don't know, 4 to 8 weeks or 8 weeks to 12 weeks and so on, and do a table per directorate maybe on that, if that helps.
I think it's important to know how many people this really affects. And I'm not, you know, of course, everybody has reasons, but particularly the musculoskeletal things which are growing, it may be a very specific thing that is going on within a group, an organisation that is causing this issue, and it's isolated to a few, or it's across many people, and we need to know that.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much, Councillor Wood. That's a really good comment and a contribution to make. Because if you do have only a few people, but with very long-term significant issues, that can sort of skew the whole figures and make us think that there are massive issues across the board. So that is a really, I think that's an important. Sorry, it's additional work for you, Laith, but yes, it's a good report to have a look at. Okay, so I think we've still got one more hand. Yes, Tracy, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, sorry, it was thank you, Chair. It was just to say that we actually welcome the additional work. It's something that I'm hugely passionate about, so it's something that we do really want to support. I just would say just a word of caution that when we're splitting some of this data out, we might not actually be able to bring it back in the manner in which you'd wish for it to be, because it might identify groups or individuals of people if we splitted it down in that way. So we will do our very best. We'll bring something back, and if it's not split as it's been asked for by Councillor Wood by week comparisons, we'll explain the reasons why, because it is highly personal and sensitive data that we're talking about here as well. So just to put that word of caution, but Councillor Wood will do our very best for you and ensure that we can bring back as much as possible so that you have a greater understanding.
Thank you very much.
That's great. Do we have anybody else with any more questions or any more recommendations? Have we captured all of them now? I think so.
Okay,
yes.
Just to clarify, Chair, obviously these comments and recommendations will go back to Cabinet, and then we're looking at reports to be produced that will go to Cabinet and on to CPR then subsequently. Yes. Okay, lovely. Thanks for confirming, Chair.
That's marvellous. Thank you ever so much. Right then, I think we can now move on to agenda item 7, which is our Q4 Scrutiny Recommendation Tracker 2021-2022. I think our Cabinet Officer Mark is going to quickly run us through these. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, committee. Just to make obviously new members aware, this is a regular quarterly report that is provided to corporate performance and the other scrutiny committees. The main purpose being to report progress on scrutiny recommendations that have been made by the committee over a period of a year or so and longer, and to confirm the committee's proposed annual forward work programme for 2022-23. This report advises members of progress in relation to the Scrutiny Committee's historical recommendations and the proposed forward work programme, as I've discussed already. We have a number of appendices with the report. The fourth quarter recommendation tracking for January to March 2022, which is Appendix A. Appendix B relates to the Cabinet Annual Forward Work Programme for 22-23, and that is provided to all scrutiny members, committees, basically to show how that feeds into the work that is also done at the committee level. We have, for example, a number of statutory reports that go to Cabinet first and then are referred on to corporate performance and potentially other scrutiny committees for their scrutiny and consideration. And finally, Appendix C, which is our proposed annual forward work programme schedule for corporate performance for 22-23. To make members aware, this is a bit of a moving feast in terms of reports. We do, as the quarters go on, things might change and things might slip and move around, but they will be recorded on that. There is a relevant column, so there is a log of when things do get moved or slipped, or there are some changes or additions put in. For example, now tonight, members have already recommended a number of additional sub-reports to our regular quarterly sickness absence reporting. So those type of reports will be added as we go through the year. Just to make members aware of the key recommendations for this report tonight, the status of the actions listed in Appendix A to the report to be agreed. which is our tracking, the Cabinet Annual Forward Work Programme for 22-23 in regards to the context of the Corporate Performance Scrutiny Committee being noted. I will apologise to members. There is a slight typo in this report. It relates to homes and safe communities, but it should be corporate performance. So apologies for that. When we get the report for the decision notice and minutes, that will be amended. So apologies to that to committee. And also the committee's proposed annual forward work programme schedule for 22-23, which is attached to Appendix C, be approved and uploaded to the council's website. I'll just go into some of these areas first, Chair. For example, in Appendix A, some of the sort of historic recommendations. Some members who have been on the committee previously will be aware of those, and obviously newer members won't be. We do have a number on here that are now completed, but I do draw members' attention as well. We do have some ongoing recommendations. For example, and obviously Laith has already alluded to this, around future sickness absence reporting, minute number 764 from January 2022. About sickness absence comparisons with the local authorities. Obviously that is with Laith at the moment to include for future reports, and he's outlined tonight that is something that is going to be in progress as we move on through the year. We have Project Zero in June's agenda, which is incorrect. That should be in July, so that will be amended prior to it being uploaded onto the website. Like I say, with the annual forward work programme, it is a moving feast. Some of these items will get moved around and changed. Some items that come down from Cabinet for whatever reason might be just taken at the Cabinet level, not necessarily passed on, but by and large most things will come down. But if we do have any additions or amendments, etc., there is a column on here which provides comments, updates and reasons for slippages, so they will be updated as the year goes ahead and will be accessible to members and to members of the public as well once we produce these quarterly reports. And that's really just a whistle-stop tour for that, Chair. I think probably with these, as the year goes on and members are more comfortable with the types of reports coming through and we get new additional reports as we have tonight, you know, I think there'll be a bit more au fait and be a bit more questions around the forward work programme. But if there are any questions tonight or any comments, I'll obviously take those on board and attempt to answer them. So I'll hand over to you now, Chair.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Mark. And for those existing members who will know that this is something that normally your chair would take you through, I will. But for the very first meeting, we thought it was probably safer if Mark took you through these reports. So has anybody got any questions or any recommendations, anything that they would like to say about any of these appendixes? Oh, I've got a hand from Councillor Haynes.
Sorry, Chair. I'm not sure if it's relevant to this section, but I noticed that in all of it, particularly the forward work project, that there's no forward work on the online contact. And since one of our key objectives is to work with and for our communities, if anyone's ever tried to use the "I've got a problem" section of the online contact, it is a phenomenally hard, ineffective system. Particularly if you have a problem that falls outside, "Oh, I've got a pothole." For example, recently I tried to report a wall falling by that system onto a pavement. It came back that it wasn't eligible to be filled. So I just wonder whether we need to have a look at this. I understand this falls into the remit of this committee, of that online contact, and try to improve it, and perhaps fit it into our forward work project.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Councillor Haynes. I believe I have read something about this. I'm trying to rack my brains if this was something in a previous meeting where you've talked about the digital contact with customers. I've got Tom back with us. Thank you very much, Tom, for putting your hand up.
No problem at all, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Haynes, for the question. That you are absolutely right in terms of improving the council's digital services is a key area of commitment in the annual delivery plan. I referenced the performance report that will be coming to your committee in the next month or so, and there will be some updates as part of that. So perhaps as part of that discussion, Councillor Haynes, we could explore that in more detail. And what I can do is make sure that we provide you with some commentary in terms of the project that's underway at the moment to move our online services to a new system, which I'm hopeful will improve that access and usability, but certainly one for the committee, absolutely, as you say, as part of its remit.
Thank you very much.
And just to let committee know as well, there have been similar presentations around digital inclusion on some of the other scrutiny committees like Homes and Safe. So if, for example, Councillor Haynes, if you want me to share a link to some of the previous reports, I can, share those with you as well to get a flavour of what's been looked at with some of the other committees as well.
Oh, I'd appreciate it. Yes, please.
Not a problem. In terms of this, Chair, are we looking to add this on to the forward work programme, or as Tom said, happy to look at that in the broader context of the performance reporting and have that commentary?
Yeah, I think if we can have Tom's report first, and then we can all look at that and as Councillor Haynes has said, this is an important issue that we get this right. So I think I think we'll do this step by step, if that's okay with you, Councillor Haynes.
As you wish, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else want to ask any questions about the tracker or the forward work plan? No, that's wonderful. So we move then to agree the status of the actions on Appendix A, that the Cabinet Annual Forward Work Programme for 2022-23 has been noted, and that the committee's proposed annual forward work plan schedule at Appendix C is approved, and with the amendments that are going to be made, and that's going to be uploaded to the council's website. Is everybody okay with that? Marvellous.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Goodjohn has his hand up.
I just want to say I move.
Thank you ever so much. Anyone else? No, that's brilliant. As far as I know, there are no items that are urgent. There's nothing more that we need to discuss. So I propose that we now close this meeting. Yeah, I want to thank everybody very much for their contributions and members for their patience with me as I'm new to this. And I want to congratulate Councillor Goodjohn on his Vice Councillor post, and just to say to all of you, the next meeting now will be held on the 13th of July at 6 o'clock. And everybody off for a cold shower.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
night. Good night.